Your first reaction might be to say, oh my gosh, all these poor people are on the street. This is terrible. But what's really important is, are you really seeing the underlying issues? Why are they there? And that question is the most important question to answer.
More than 500,000 Americans are homeless on any given night. The problem has grown worse in recent years.
Why is a city as prosperous as San Francisco have a homeless problem? Homelessness is a disease, just like addiction.
New encampments have been popping up throughout LA in the last 5 months.
The state of California can no longer treat homelessness and housing insecurity as someone else's problem.
We don't want to be the tip of the spear.
How did we get here?
We don't have time.
Ma'am, the paramedics are coming. They're here.
Look on the ground. What is it that you're seeing? You're seeing pieces of foil for fentanyl. You're seeing hypodermic needles, all kinds of evidence that says this is not a poverty problem. This is something else entirely.
Lost at least 5 people that I knew on the street to fentanyl overdose.
They don't want to listen.
But a lot of it is because there's nobody teaching them about recovery, about accountability, about being productive, and you can get out of this. It's okay. Stay there on the ground. Nobody's saying, get up off the ground.
Nowhere is the homeless crisis more apparent than San Francisco. The Golden City spends hundreds of millions of dollars each year to address homelessness, yet the problem has exploded. Politicians promise to end the crisis,
We are going to eliminate homelessness by the end of this year,
only to throw up their hands in defeat. So what went wrong? Why are some cities surrendering while others are reducing their homeless population? As in many cases, it boils down to governance. And nearly all the cities in crisis have one policy in common: housing first.
And the housing first model is premised on a very simple and almost intuitive idea that if you're homeless, the problem is that you need a house. And so to solve homelessness, we should merely give people homes.
And now, this policy is being pushed from the top down.
The program, as I understand it, was started out of New York for the very severely chronically homeless, I believe in the 80s and 90s, and the Bush administration got a hold of it, implemented it in 2008. Under the next administration, it was rolled out as a one-size-fits-all solution.
And there's a lot of appeal to that idea that, look, if this person is going to be on the street for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, why don't we just give them a house and not deal with all of the problems of picking them up, putting them in jail, putting them in a hospital, doing the rest of it. Let's find a central place where we can treat them. The problem with this theory is that if you look at the numbers of what's actually causing people to be homeless, it's overwhelmingly problems with mental health and drug addiction.
And Housing First requires no sobriety or treatment in order to receive permanent housing.
If you're gonna put somebody in housing and you don't provide any type of services for them, no treatment services, no case management, no anything for them, you just stick them in the house just so you don't have to look at them, and they can do what they want in there, how are we really helping them?
You want to draw someone in and you want to help them get off the street, right? So what they do is they just say, well, we're just going to allow the drugs anyway. And now you have all these people that are staying in shelters, that are staying in navigation centers, that are living in tent encampments, using in massive quantities of meth, of fentanyl, heroin, crack cocaine. The city sanctions their drug use within that city-sanctioned site that your tax dollars and my tax dollars are paying for.
I mean, it brings tears to my eyes because it doesn't look at the individual. It doesn't look at what his or her potential is, and it doesn't help them develop that. To say that all we're gonna do is help them aspire to be like that for the rest of their lives by sticking them in a house and not addressing, the issues, it's horrible. I think it's one of the most oppressive things we've done in this century, to be honest with you. And I'm so committed now to getting this changed.
From 2004 to 2014, San Francisco spent $2 billion on 3,000 new units of permanent housing at a cost of $666,000 per unit, more than double the median home price in America. That money could be spent so much more effectively.
It's shocking to me how little innovation we have because everything is permanent supportive housing or bust, and everything else in between is just keeping you alive until you get there. The problem is that half the people on the street aren't going to be alive to realize that housing.
Los Angeles felt the impact of Housing First immediately.
Reverend Andy Bales from the Union Rescue Mission says he saw it coming in 2014 when the national thought process on homelessness shifted towards a Housing First model. He says he saw donations to the missions on Skid Row plummet.
We had foundations that used to give us $1 million shift to Housing First only. We had another foundation that shifted that gave us $750,000.
And only now is his intuition providing proof. This study, released this week from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, showing since the recovery services decreased, homelessness went up more than 15% nationwide.
Compounding the problem, cities like Austin, Texas have legalized street camping. Addicts poured out of shelters and treatment, back to where drugs, alcohol, and crime abound. In Austin, homeless deaths rose by 25% in a matter of months.
The number that should absolutely horrify Americans is that in LA, you have about 3 individuals die on the streets a day. If you look at this relative to the whole homeless community in LA, this means that they have death rates higher than soldiers that we sent off to Iraq or Afghanistan.
First of all, it's no place to live, right? You living in a tent or in a doorway, it is so substandard, right, for anybody. This is not a way for a human in this year to ever live. There's no infrastructure for it. Where's the toilet? Where's the sanitation? Where's the ability to even get help when you're sick, right? It's not there.
In May of 2021, Austin residents voted to reinstate the city's camping ban.
I just believe that today is just no accountability in society as a whole for people's actions anymore. It's like I'll use the bathroom any way I want to, whether it's in front of kids or not. I'm just saying about what I see. And I'm still gonna serve those that are in need or somebody that's gonna always be less fortunate than me. We've worked with programs that when they first started like taking people off of the street, housing programs, people would live in houses and live in rooms and still like they were living on the street. They wouldn't sleep in the bed, everything was close to them. Paranoia set in, they didn't trust anybody being in there. They didn't even know how to live inside.
Are we providing housing for homeless people so they can get off the street so we don't have to look at them? Are we providing them housing so they can be able to sustain themselves and be able to live?
1,000 individuals dying on the streets every year is not compassionate, and merely saying we're going to let people camp on the streets because we think it's uncompassionate to push them off it is not the right path. Places like San Diego and others say, listen, if we're going to push you off the streets, we're going to give you an alternative.
And according to people who have experienced homelessness firsthand, the root of the problem is mental illness and addiction, not housing.
Good morning. The meeting will come to order. Welcome to the Thursday, February 11th meeting of the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee.
Agenda 1 is a hearing on the San Francisco Recovery Summit Working Group report and findings.
Tom Wolf, I'd like to invite you to speak.
Good morning, everyone. Only 3 years ago today, I was sleeping on a piece of cardboard in a doorway on Golden Gate and Hyde in the Tenderloin, severely addicted to heroin. I am living proof that there's a direct correlation between homelessness and substance use in the city. You can build all the housing and get everybody off the street housed, but if you're struggling with addiction or mental illness, you're just housed with drug addiction and mental illness. People say, oh, I lost my job and I became homeless. But then you have to ask, why did you lose your job? I lost my job because I was going to work and shooting up in the bathroom on my lunch break, and then going back and sitting on my desk and passing out. From what I saw and the people that I encountered on the street, it's about 8 out of every 10 people that are visible, that we see every day out on the street, living in tents, etc. They're struggling with addiction.
A recent study agreed. Over 75% of unsheltered have a drug or alcohol addiction, and a similar number also have a severe mental health disorder.
I was a child support officer for the city and county of San Francisco. It was a very stressful job, working with a lot of domestic violence victims. I became homeless because of my addiction, and I think a lot more people do become homeless because of addiction than what people think. You know, scientifically, we know that addiction is a disease. So my survival instincts got basically corrupted by these drugs. I also needed drugs in the same kind of way that I needed food. I would do anything to get them, making up lies to get money from my family while I was out there. And while I was on the street homeless, even then, I still thought I had some control over my life because all I really wanted in my addiction was the drugs. That's how powerful it is. Some people criticize me for some of the stuff that I say, but you know what? It can't just be all touchy-feely out there, because being on the street is not touchy-feely.
Cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles fail to realize the power of addiction and dangerously believe that addiction is a choice, not a disease. They condone this behavior and even help promote it.
One of the main policies that I feel like I'm constantly battling is the city's obsession with harm reduction.
The baseline goal of harm reduction is to keep you alive long enough in the hopes that you'll find recovery. But what it's morphed into in San Francisco is something different. It's really blurring the lines between harm reduction and then drug promotion at the same time.
How this is playing out on our streets is that instead of encouraging treatment, what we say, just keep on going.
Every program that has a program has to have a harm reduction policy within it.
One of those requirements that's listed really down at the bottom and buried in there is that you need to have clean drug paraphernalia available at all times for the residents of your drug rehab. They'll hand out a pamphlet saying, here are some safe ways for you to use fentanyl so you don't overdose. Make sure you use a clean needle, make sure you clean the area that you're going to inject, make sure you register it before you inject the needle inside your vein. And then at the end of all that, it'll say, enjoy your high. Here I am trying to kick heroin, man. And I'm in the drug rehab and I walk by the table every day with syringes and cookers and foil and straws looking right at me and pipes. And you wonder why nobody's getting clean. You make it easier to get high and so hard to get treatment in San Francisco that it hurts. And it's literally killing people.
In 2019, the city saw a 70% increase over 2018 in overdose deaths. And during the pandemic, San Francisco went so far as to deliver free drugs and alcohol to homeless staying in hotel rooms that the city paid for. What happens when a city plays drug dealer? In 2020, the death rate among San Francisco homeless doubled. Many of these lives could have been saved. We know how to fix this problem. And the good news is that leaders across the country are doing just that.
Homelessness is not an issue in California, it is the issue. When I first took office, it quickly became clear to me that the search for consensus on the perfect thing to do was turning into non-action, not just here in the city, but up and down the entire state of California. I knew we had to do things differently. Allowing somebody to live on a sidewalk in our city streets is condemning them to die on the street. That was unacceptable. I do not allow tent encampments in San Diego on our sidewalks anymore. Every individual has a right to shelter. But if we provide that shelter, you have an obligation to use it. So I started a series of new bridge shelters in San Diego. It's a bridge between living on the street and being able to stand on your own 2 feet in that place on your own. I don't want you off the street for a night or for a week, but we want to help provide a safe, clean, sanitary, and supportive environment to get you off the streets for good.
If you've got a need, you're willing to work together, we can fix things 90% of the time. Before we had the bridge shelters, people had no choice. And that's why the judges, they wouldn't enforce the policy because there was no alternative to being homeless, because there was no place to start the process to get off the street. Everybody drank the Housing First Kool-Aid, which I knew. There was a city council meeting and they said, we're not gonna do shelters anymore because we're gonna do Housing First. And I said, on camera with all the news agents outside, this is gonna be a disaster. Because now people don't have any place to go to wait for that housing that may or may not ever come. Look at the billions and billions and billions of dollars being wasted right now in communities like Seattle, Portland, LA, San Francisco, San Jose, billions of dollars by allowing people to kill themselves publicly. Where you could take that same money and invest in people on the street and say, you're better than this.
Bridge shelters are so much more than a shelter. Housing navigation, how do we match you with resources to get that apartment of your own? Dealing with mental health and substance abuse issues, dealing with job training issues, bringing all of those services underneath one location. One of the changes that I made was establish a series of storage centers for personal belongings, free of charge. It has allowed our streets to be much cleaner. Again, it was the right thing to do by changing that dynamic, providing the incentive to do the right thing, but also the consequences if you do the wrong thing. I'm proud that we're the only urban county in California where homelessness has gone down the last 2 years. And there's nothing more I like than to interact with somebody who maybe was a skeptic of what we were doing in terms of putting up a bridge shelter or the help and support that we're given. They come back to me and say, Mr. Mayor, you know what? This worked out pretty well.
San Diego reduced its unsheltered homeless population by more than 20% in recent years. What does San Diego understand that its neighbors don't? That compassion must work with accountability, and that by banning street camping, we can incentivize people to seek better opportunities.
Back to the old days where you would have tent encampments, that was not helpful to the individuals, obviously, that were living on the streets. It's not helpful for your neighborhoods, for your business. That's the wrong approach. That's the failed status quo approach.
If I was on the street and you'd come up to me when I was sitting there hitting my heroin on my foil and they said, hey, if you said, hey, Tom, you want to go to rehab? Do you have a drug problem? My answer to you would have been, what drug problem? I'm just chilling out here, man. That's what most people say. I agree with Mayor Faulconer on the issue of street camping in that so long as we have a shelter bed that we can offer them, they should be obligated to take that shelter bed at least for a day or two, right? To just try it, what it's like getting off the street.
In Austin, some individuals are taking action into their own hands. And Alan Graham believes there's a better approach.
We believe very powerfully that government should only play a subsidiary role to you and I in mitigating these profound human needs that our society explores. What we want to do is encourage people to move out of that transactional mentality that we're going to go build, $600 billion worth of housing over here, and we're going to put people in there, and it's going to solve this housing problem. It's not.
The people that we serve here are the hardest to house. The average age of the people who live here is 58 years old. The average length of time on the streets is 10 years. These are folks that genuinely, they never thought they would get off the streets. They were certain that they would be on the streets until they died. What we believe is that the forged family has to come around them, right? That it is all of us. And what happens in our culture today is that we've abdicated responsibility for that to the government, and we've said, City Hall, state government, federal government, this is your problem to solve. And it's not. It's a human problem. It's all of us. When you decide on one way, you're limiting innovation, and that's really what's happened. Community First, the movement, is an innovation. Lots of people thought that this model could never work. We continue to invest in relationship. We continue to show up for each other. And it turns out that community actually does work.
Community First Village gives homeless individuals something Housing First policies can never: a family. People holding each other accountable, supporting each other. By providing a sustainable ecosystem for these individuals to thrive in, drug addiction, alcohol use, and other harmful behaviors have plummeted.
How do you bring somebody into purposeful living? And when you look at what's happening inside this community, what they're being given is a community, organic farming operation, a blacksmithing shop, a wood shop, an art house, all the things that allow people to wake up in the morning and have purpose. Well, there's rules to live here. You must pay rent. And do you know that we don't have a rent collection problem here and never have? Because everybody knows that they must pay rent. When you pay rent, turns out that you're invested. You have skin in the game, and every human needs to have skin in the game. And that is what is lacking out there on the streets.
Incentives and accountability work. The Doe Fund in New York City has transformed tens of thousands of lives through its Ready, Willing, and Able program. which combines paid work, transitional housing, and comprehensive social services, including sobriety support. An independent study by Harvard University found that ready, willing, and able graduates are 60% less likely to be convicted of a felony 3 years after exiting the program. Researchers at the University of Alabama tested a similar hypothesis by providing homeless with housing conditioned upon drug and alcohol treatment. They found that 64% of residents maintained sobriety. Instead of pumping billions of dollars into Housing First, it's time to use performance-based funding that rewards the programs that truly make a difference. For the price of one housing unit in San Francisco, we could build dozens of transitional shelters. Or fund proven treatment programs. Meanwhile, our elected officials must promote policies that address the root causes of homelessness.
What I think everybody's aim should be is this: self-sufficiency. We don't want people in this perpetual cycle. We want financial independence. We want emotional independence. We want independence that's perhaps free of a substance that's keeping them down.
We always are told that me and Craig we're not the most compassionate individuals in the world. We take the compassionate approach by making it happen for people. And making it happen also means sometimes telling them no. But what we don't do is we don't give up on anyone. No matter what they do, how they do it, we're gonna be there for them. That's what keeps us going and keeps us moving toward whether we have no money or not, we will still do this work.
Homelessness is a humanitarian crisis, but there are solutions. By denying the solutions, we excuse ourselves from making hard choices that can transform lives. It's easy to hand someone an apartment key and think that the problem is solved. It's hard work getting them to treatment, holding them accountable, and helping them return to a productive, safe, and healthy life. But that work must be done if we truly care for the most vulnerable among us.
Thank you for watching this video. PragerU is doing a survey on the homelessness problem. What do you think? Please click the link to take our survey. Thanks so much for your support.